my perspective was, if I don't want to be a physician anymore, which to me was top of the food chain, and from a medical perspective, then why would I want to be in medicine? What I was able to determine a couple years after the fact, there are other ways to help people, and there are other ways to be in the medical field and be happy and find my happiness, at least.
Brian, you're such a fascinating guy. I've been watching you from afar for a while on social media, watching your journey. And I think, you're the president-elect of ABRAT. You started in neurodiagnostics. Actually, I'm going to stop. I want to let you tell your story because it's so fascinating. It's not a straight line by any means. So let's talk about how you started and then what motivated you to get where you're at, and then where you're going to go.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to be here as well.
Awesome.
So thank you very much for having me. It's very far from a straight line. I can go way back to, I've been in the medical field for over 20 years. But where that really came from was early on in life, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to help people. Yeah. I think in 7th grade was probably the first time I realized I want to help people. And that was really where my direction was to become a physician. And so everything I did, through college and everything was also geared toward that, getting into medical school. And that's really, and I was able to get into medical school, attended for a few years, was really not feeling it, I guess, for lack of better. It was challenging. It was kind of one of those things where the first year wasn't, I felt like I wasn't as excited as I expected to be. And I had friends in the year ahead of me that were like, well, second year's better. Second year, you're more clinical based or systems based. And so okay, I'll take your word for it. Yeah. Again, same thing, second year was really struggle, just not interesting. And I just didn't feel as much of a passion. And so same thing, third year's better. You're in the hospital, you're doing your rotations. I'm like, okay. Take your word for it. Get into the hospital, get into the rotations. And I was just I was like, something's got to give. Yeah. And don't get me wrong. There's, some of that was, I was struggling heavily with depression and whatnot. But it was more than that. And that's really where I needed to make a decision and make a very difficult decision to leave and do what was best for me. Yeah.
Do you remember a specific time where you were like, hey, this isn't what I thought it was going to be? Or was it gradual?
I think it was gradual to an extent, but what really stood out was that third year, because you're in the hospitals, you're seeing patients, you are really interacting with residents, interacting with your attendings, and so you are really much more kind of in the heat of it, and just what feels more like what you're going to be doing. And I say that was where I really, I was struggling with depression, anxiety. I was at that point starting to have panic attacks. I was having trouble going to my rotations but there was a lot of compounding factors, I believe, because I was realizing that this just wasn't what I wanted for my life anymore. And that was a really hard thing to come to, or just decision to come to, knowing that since 7th grade, this was all my focus. Everything I did in college, like I said, everything was geared towards this career. So,
and then how did you quit medical school?
Yeah. So I left medical school.
How hard was that for you?
That was unbelievable.
This was a dream, probably.
It was. Life. Yeah. And even today, when people hear that, they're, it's like, well, why didn't you just finish? You were 1 year away from finishing, and, there's a whole lot there, but I think it's one of those things, early on, now in business and now in the, administrative side of business, we talk about pivoting. Yeah. Then, it wasn't, to me, it was much more complicated than just, I'm going to, this isn't what I want to do. Of course. Because my whole life was geared towards that. So it's
almost like a dream.
Yeah. And I felt like I was letting everyone around me down, family, friends that were all excited and supporting me all the way, and here, leave. So it was an extremely difficult decision to make, but also knowing internally that I wasn't going down a path that I was healthy, that I was doing the right thing for me.
Yeah.
But again, depression tells you a lot of things that.
Yeah.
So there was some of that.
If you listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Which is quite remarkable about your story. Number one, the bravery it takes to pivot like that. Because I'm a planner as well,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
where I like to have my goal and then I finish the goal.
Mm-hmm.
From the time we talked this morning, you seem like you're kind of built the same way.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
That is. I haven't typically. Yeah, I'm not someone who just doesn't finish.
Yeah,
and that's what it felt like too. Like I'm not that I'm giving up or that I'm quitting. That I'm, you know,
to listen to yourself enough to have that, hindsight or not hindsight, but to have that self-awareness where you can make that scary decision of quitting, listening to yourself, knowing that you should quit. And you probably dealt with a lot of stuff of like, what is it going to be like? Like you said, you had friends and family. How are they going to react?
Mm-hmm.
But that's awesome. And I really want to touch into the, the mental, side that you had. Let's paint the full picture of Brian first. The pivot to neurodiagnostics. It seems like that's a natural pivot, but uncommon, I would say. Yeah. How did you get there?
Well, see, and that's where the straight line, so I was on a straight line to medical school and all that. Then it went haywire because neurodiagnostics didn't come into the picture for another 7, 8 years.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I wandered the earth in like kung fu. No, just
did DJing, which we'll get into.
Yeah, so I discovered DJing. That was one thing that came into my life, as a creative outlet. To be honest, I mean, a joke, but yeah, that was when I started DJing. I needed something to just a release, something to have some kind of creative outlet. But I worked in. I had the opportunity to work at in marketing for a couple years for a test preparation company, which was fantastic. I have a psych degree, so it kind of allowed me to. I think one of those things of helping people and wanting to help people is really understanding people's motivations, understanding what they need, and so that was a different way of utilizing that. Again, I wasn't really fully in tune with what I could have done with that, but it was something, I did for a couple of years. But then really looking at from that point of, I really determined that I really did want to help people from a medical perspective. And one of the things too is leaving medical school. Again, it was a very narrow frame of mind looking back, but my perspective was, if I don't want to be a physician anymore, which to me was top of the food chain, and from the medical perspective, then why would I want to be in medicine at all? Like, why would I want to do any of these other, professions within the field? Because that's the pinnacle. Yeah. Again, very narrow framework. Yeah. But again, like when that's just kind of where I was in life. What I was able to determine a couple years after the fact is looking back was that there are other ways to help people, and there are other ways to be in the medical field and be happy and, find my happiness at least.
Yeah. What helped you make that determination or that acknowledgement?
I think it was just being outside of it.
Yeah.
To be honest. I enjoyed, the company I worked for was fantastic. I enjoyed what I was doing, but it was once again having that not a full sense of fulfillment like that I was feeling in medical school. And I think that's really, and that's where I started to think to myself, okay, I spent way too much focus on, getting to medical school, being in medical school, and not leaving maybe earlier when I was, maybe, I think in the grand scheme of things. So I retooled and reframed, took a new framework of, okay, I need to not to say pivot again.
Yeah, no,
but
yeah.
when I realize that I am not happy or that I need more,
Yeah.
don't wait.
Yeah.
Make that decision and know that it's the right decision, and then go for it and start at that time too. If you think about it, here at that point, I'm in my like late 20s. I'm like, I don't have my stuff together. How do I can't just flounder and float through life.
Is that what started the process for you? You just had, shower thoughts or little internal reflections, and you're thinking to yourself, this is not the path that I want to take.
Yeah.
And then what's the process for you to make that huge pivot, going from this isn't where I want to be, and then the next step, and then the next step? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So really what I knew at that point was I wanted to get back into helping people, but I didn't know what that looked like. So it was really, really exploring what about helping people? What about the medical field? What things interest me as well? Not just what I think I need to do. So I really have always enjoyed having and understanding like psychology and people. So I started exploring what it would look like to go back to school for clinical psychology, those types of things. And similarly, I took a couple classes to see if getting back into that from that perspective would be where I wanted to go. And once again, one of those, just quickly determining this isn't right. And I ended up going back into the hospital. I used to work in the lab, like as an undergrad and whatnot. So I wanted to get back into the actual hospital setting. I enjoy the hospital setting.
Yeah.
And so that's really, so I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had experience in that. I knew what I was doing. I could go back. And so that's really what I did. That's the next step.
Yeah.
And then my wife and I always said at that point too, if I could just get into, I was working for a small rural hospital. And just, she always told me too, it's like, if you just get into, your organization, like, that
grow,
you'll figure it out. Like there'll be a lot more opportunities, and you will figure it out. And that's really what I did. I started at, where I'm at in the lab, and I was really, neurodiagnostics found me. Yeah. I wasn't, it was not something I'd ever really looked into or known about. And
which is so common in our industry. Exactly. Is how EEG finds us. It found me as well. And a lot of people that I talked to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. It was the manager at the time. I worked with his daughter. Yeah. And he would stop into the lab and have lunch with his daughter. And we just got to talking. And then he realized like my background and, and those types of things. And he was trying to start to really build the neurodiagnostic program. And he was looking to do a kind of a crazy like internal training program. He didn't really know. He didn't have a neurodiagnostic background himself. Yeah. He was just trying to figure it out. He was going to hire, 6 people or something and just, do a in-house training. And I got to be one of those guinea pigs, basically, coming in as a neurodiagnostic assistant and just.
I mean, he probably had a 10-minute conversation with you and said, I hit the jackpot with this guy. I mean, talking to you over the last, on email, what I see you on social media and then this morning has been, you truly are you are the epitome of what I think a neurodiagnostic technologist, what our capabilities are. You really have exemplified that and shown how capable we are. And I'm sure that had a lot of mentorship, invested in you. Yeah. So would you consider, was he your first mentor? Yeah. Is that?
Yeah, for sure.
Because mentorship is huge for you.
It is. Yeah. And it is. And that's now in my career, that's where, I want to be the mentor to other people that I had. Yeah, he was. And he continued to be my mentor because in essence, not only getting me into the field, and then from there, like you said, for one, thank you for the compliments. I'm very bad at taking compliments. If I cringe or whatever when you say nice things, it's don't take offense to it. But just getting in there, and then from there, wanting to, taking like that pathway of on the job training because I had a degree, just getting my stuff done as quickly as I can so I could become registered, so I could learn more and do more in the department. But then, it just kind of grew from there. One thing I talked to them about, or my manager and supervisor at the time, just feeling like I've been through a lot of different education.
Yeah.
I've been, whether undergrad, medical school, just different formats.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sat down with them one day and said, I know you want to do this again. Would you, I would like to, give you some of my ideas on how we could maybe do this better. It's like my training was great. I everything was, but it's like, how can we take it to the next, how can we, this kind of lends to, I'm just always looking for continuous improvement.
Yeah.
That's just kind of part of my makeup and my framework. And I think that was one of those things. And maybe that's what he saw in me too at that time, because I didn't really see it that way. I just was like, well, I think there's some things that we could do better. I think we could be more consistent and that we could train a little differently. And, I did a little bit of that on the side of, off doing some training as a tech, as we brought in new people, doing some of that. And then just had the opportunity to apply for a lead tech position at that point. And that was a lot of what that lead tech then position was mm-hmm. training, orientation, mentorship. And really, process improvement, things in the department.
So how do you approach your mentorship style? Or let me ask you this. When you were being mentored, what were some of the things that you really appreciated that you then moved over towards to apply toward your mentorship? Because I think as a tech, as an EEG tech, we're a special group of people mm-hmm. and we share a lot of commonalities. And one of those is we like to help people. I think what you said was huge as far as looking internally and seeing what I can improve. Or I don't know if you said that now, but we talked mm-hmm. about it this morning. That's one of the things that, I'm learning from you in our conversations is that you really have a good self-awareness where you can look back and say, not everything I do is great. Not everything I do is good. What can I improve? Let's continue to improve. I think a lot of people in the healthcare industry in particular, I think they have that mentality. They're helpers mm-hmm. and they want to help. So they're constantly reevaluating how they can help. So for EEG techs who, and I'm assuming so many are, who want to become mentors, how did you approach that? Or going back to my first question, that's
a great question. Yeah. Really what it came down to for me was, it started with the education piece. Mm-hmm. So giving some, like, how we trained and how that opportunity that was given to me. And so that was where I, really kind of started all of that work. Was I wanted to make sure that the people coming in had just as much that, just all the things that I had, and then more. Like, how can we prepare them even better? Mm-hmm. And what can we change in education? What can we change in the training? How can we change, up how preceptoring happened or how that works so that it sets people up to succeed mm-hmm. in the best way? So that was really, I think, where it started, again, setting up for success, like in passing their exams and their board exams and whatnot. But then for me, it also then grew into some of the opportunities that I had to explore how we did things. Mm-hmm. So as a lead tech, I was really tasked with a number of things, from looking at our processes, looking at developing a quality metric system for our department, because those things were important to me and I could tell they were important to my leadership. And just in general, I think that's part of healthcare. We take care of people and we, but if we're not consistent, if we're not, like, how do we measure? How do we gauge, like, if we're providing the best quality care to our patients? I've said this over and over again. I'll continue to say it, in my role now, but even back then, it's like everyone's always impressed with how large our program is, and I could care less if you've got 2 people on your team or 100 people on your team, if you're not providing quality care, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
You know, I don't want the biggest program, I want the best program. And it's great if it's also the biggest program.
Yeah.
But so having that opportunity then to evaluate those things. You know, I knew our team was performing at a high level, was giving the best care possible. They were treating our patients with the utmost dignity and respect and compassion. But how do we measure that? You know, I mean, that's all, I know it's anecdotal, but like, you know, when you say that, you know, if you give those kind of, you're not going to.
How can we quantify it?
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, that's what then helps you build a program. That's what helps you prove that this is what we need when you go and want to change things or grow things. Those are the things that matter then, that you not only say it, but you can show it.
Yeah. I think that resonates probably with so many techs who are passionate about their department, their job, so many things that they would like to change. So let's talk to that real quick. If there's a tech out there who is wanting to see some type of change in their department, what are the steps? How would you advise them to approach their leadership for that change?
Well, that's another great question, because I think you need to really, it's one of the things I've learned from a healthcare administration standpoint and just being in the administrative side of things is, one, know your audience. Mm-hmm. You know, if you have a leader who cares about the numbers and who cares about those types of things, then find a way to appeal to their nature and those, like bringing them, you know, or bring that as the proposal. You know that your leader is numbers driven. You know, think of a way that you can, you know, help them.
Yeah,
quantify. Yeah, but like in essence, it gives you the opportunity to invest, but it's helping them.
Yeah,
you know, you can usually get people on board if you're offering them something that's going to help them.
Yeah.
But there's all different types of personalities and behavioral personalities and whatnot. Because there's some people that care more about, you know, the feeling and the patient experience, and not that that's not quantifiable, but when you're selling to those people, or when you're trying to influence those people, you know, you're not going to throw a bunch of numbers because they don't care about the numbers,
right?
You know, or make sure that the numbers you're throwing out or what you want to do is very customer driven, and that's what you're going to provide to them.
Yeah.
But again, and back to, you know, like, how do you do? For one, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
And that's easier said than done. But also, you know, I think it just depends. I think every leader, everyone that you're going to, can be intimidating in different ways. So again, getting to know somebody a little bit more before you just jump in and try and, you know, because what you don't ever want to do is, you know, you don't want to offend people. You don't want to, you know, you don't want people to think that they're doing things wrong. It's really, again, about, we're helping, you know, like, I want to do more. I want to help. I want our department or our service to be the best it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Because people can get, when we're talking about process, when we're talking about how we do things, people can get personally tied in to those things, as opposed to, you know, and take offense to you wanting to change things or seeing an avenue. It's a challenge that we run into a lot as people.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to have somebody critique something that you came up with, mm-hmm. because you have a personal attachment to it, or we tend to have a personal attachment to it.
Yeah.
So again, it's, how do we work with each other? How do we leverage, you know, knowing that what you're trying to do is for the betterment of everybody.
Right.
And showing them that this is something that's going to benefit all of us. You know, it's not, and I think it's hard to narrow some of that down, just because I think it depends on what you're looking to present. But always looking too for your advocates, you know, people on our side. So if you don't have a great relationship with leadership, maybe a physician, you mm-hmm. know, that you're working with, or another tech that does have that relationship, and then use that and to kind of get your foot in the door because then you have a support system. You have somebody who is on your side that can help you with those types of things. And again, that all kind of comes down to mentorship and finding a mentor. I think that's,
How do you build internal relationships within your hospital? Would it be a good idea? And I ask this because there are so many techs who have taken a job out of state and they don't really know anyone. And so they don't know anyone internally. What advice would you give them to create, or at least network internally to where they can grow internal relationships?
For me, the biggest thing is just being genuine and honest, accepting, knowing that you're not trying to come in and or change things. Or I think at the end of the day, it's about people will see, if you're being genuine and you care.
Yeah,
they will see through if you've got an agenda.
Yeah.
And that's really that's part of what I've just always kind of stuck to is, my integrity and making sure that when anything I do, I'm just staying curious. I want to understand more than I want to change or criticize anything. I first need to understand.
Yeah.
And so coming in with questions and honest questions, and again, not having an agenda behind it. But just asking people, how did this come about? Or we do so much work with, and everyone, any EEG or neurodiagnostic technology does tons of work with nursing, physicians, all different types of, and we have to work together for our patients' care. So there's many times where we're doing something from an EMU perspective, and I've never been a nurse. I don't know their life.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I don't presume to.
Right.
I'm not. Yeah. And the only way I'm going to understand their perspective is if I ask, and if I, really, so we want to do something from an agency. Like we want to do something from a new process of hooking a patient up differently, or let's, doing something in a different timeline.
Yeah.
If we don't take in consideration the other care going around, then we miss an opportunity to understand.
Yeah.
And we miss an opportunity to build a relationship, because that can just as easily break down a relationship when you don't take those opportunities to ask questions. You can inadvertently create a scenario where that nursing team, or whether it be a single nurse or an whole team, now is frustrated with you or your team because your goals are the same from a patient care standpoint, but you're never talking and you're never communicating and you're butting heads, because what was maybe let's say something as simple as we want to do skin checks at 5:00 instead of 11:00 because it's easier for our schedule. Well, if we just implement that because it's easier for us, well, we haven't taken into consideration that nursing is doing med checks, they're doing, or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
And that is a horrible time for them, but we haven't given them the courtesy to understand where we all are working together.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, then all of that comes down to building trusted relationships, communicating, being curious, asking questions, because then those people become your confidants and your they're gonna look to support you when you need support.
That's a great point. Going through that process though, there has to be some sort of criticism that you get from a mentor. Otherwise, why, it's not really mentorship if they're not correcting some of the things that you're not doing well. How did you deal with criticism getting to where you are now?
Yeah, it's so exactly what you're saying. Like, I think we need to refocus, or when we talk about our perspective, I think it goes back to what I was saying about retooling your how you look at things.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at it from less of a criticism standpoint and more from a feedback standpoint, I think is what helps me.
Yeah.
Because feedback isn't negative. It's not inherently negative or positive. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I think criticism, or when you think about criticisms, you think in terms of negative.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too, from a mentorship standpoint, then is when you're giving feedback, again, being genuine and making sure that the person that is receiving that feedback knows that it's coming from a place of caring.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a place of criticism. It is from a place of wanting them to succeed, wanting them to just improve upon some of the already existing skills, things that and some of it is from things that maybe you've learned in your own past. And realizing too, from the perspective of getting that feedback, that you don't know everything. And the person who's giving you that feedback has some different perspectives. And it could be from somebody who's got years of experience more than you do, and so they just naturally are going to have more experiences. Or, feedback can come from somebody who has less experience than you. But again, they're seeing things from a perspective that you're not.
Yeah.
And I think that is extremely valuable. And I think that's what we need to really focus on is that, well, two things. It needs to come from a place of caring.
Yeah.
But if it does, then realizing that, I don't know everything.
Yeah.
I can learn from anything and anyone. And what am I going to do with this?
Just like you said, be curious.
Yes.
Be curious when you're talking to everyone, because they have different perspective, and that alone is something you can learn from. Not necessarily that they have more information than you do or that they're smarter than you, but it's a different perspective.
Exactly.
And to know all kinds of different perspectives has to be valuable.
Yes.
I in a lot of times I struggle a lot with communication styles. Mm-hmm. So I'm very receptive to a specific communication style where they can tell me literally, "Hey, Gil, you're doing terrible," but and have a smile on their face, and then I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. Let's go. Let's fix me." And then there are some communication styles where they might say that just the slightest critique, and the way they communicate, I don't receive it well. And I say I don't receive it well because I truly believe that it's not on them to, or at least from my perspective, it's not on them to change their communication style. It's for me to understand what their communication style is and what I might perceive as judgmental or condescending or whatever. That's not their intention. That's so hard, Brian. It's like trying to understand someone's intention.
Well, and that brings up so one of the fundamentals that we learn, or that we've learned from our organization, is to assume positive intent, not motivation.
Just already put yourself there.
Yeah.
In positive.
Well, yeah. And that's what and I'm the same as you, I think it's human nature, we're going to bring bias into how we perceive a conversation like that, potentially. And that can be positive or negative. So like you said, if it's coming from somebody that you might be all for it. A different person giving you that same feedback, you could assume that they're coming at you, they're attacking you. So retooling that framework and that perspective of assuming a positive intent. And I really do believe that, people aren't out there to do bad or do wrong or in whatever they're doing. And, so if we work to change that perspective of, and it can come down, you can get into such piddly things, but things can build and things can get very, relationships can get very tense because of small things that you think someone's doing this to spite you, or they're not, and they probably aren't.
No,
I mean, I think 99% of the time, they don't even realize that it's having a negative effect on you. because that's not what they're intending at all.
Yeah. And it's so hard to believe that, because you can believe that you can be convinced that that person wants to see you completely fail. And not saying that doesn't happen, but probably not as much as you think or I think it does. Because I struggle with that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think that's what you really need to realize, that most people are not, they're either not doing something intentionally.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big components to it is assuming positive intent.
I love that. Thank you so much. I really have been super excited to talk to you about that. And we'll see you next episode.
Thank you.
All right.